So for the second part, I'm just going to focus on the sills because they really are a video in of themselves. And rather like the bulkhead, they are one of the classic places for these cars to go. And also rather like the bulkhead, part of it is a bit of a design issue. Now the sills on the R107 convertible are very strong. They're great thick girders, but unfortunately that doesn't make them immune from rust. And the first issue I think to talk about is the dreaded Sil Drain. Now, by design, when water comes down the side of the windscreen, comes off the top of the scuttle, down this slight curve here, it flows into this gap between the door and also the outer wing that would be here obviously if it were on the car, and it goes through this gap down here. It's designed to drain down here, and then it goes in this hole. It comes out the bottom in a corresponding hole beneath it. So already you've got water by design coming inside the sill, which to me seems like a bad idea. Now, in order to stop the water from getting into the sill generally, there's meant to be a drainage channel which basically runs between that hole and the hole beneath it. The problem is that drainage channel is only spot welded to the inside of the outer sill. It's quite thin metal, if I recall, and it doesn't last very long. So what happens on most of these cars, the drainage channel rots out and starts letting water into the rest of the sill, and that's where you get this kind of rotting out from the inside effect. Now, a common way to check is just to put your finger inside this hole and just feel around. If you can if the drainage channel's there and present and correct, you can normally just feel it just off to one side slightly. But on most cars, rather like on this one, all you can really feel is the rusty remains of it and the remains of the rest of the inside of the outer sill that have sort of slowly been decaying in there inside. But it's a testament to just quite how thick the steel here is that this all quietly goes on behind it for years and years and years, often with very little outside evidence of it taking place. Now, the other weak spot of the sills is a jacking point. And these are tubular jacking points, and they're welded to the inside of the sill, the inner sill. And there's a bit of a weak spot here because they're also welded, or meant to be welded, to the outer sill. And they kind of protrude through a circular hole in the outer sill, which is a centimetre or two larger in diameter, as far as I can tell, from the diameter of the tube itself. And the metal used immediately around the tube to fill that gap, that difference, I think is a bit thinner than the metal that's used sort of throughout the sill generally. And I think this is why you quite often see that sort of rotting out effect around the jacking point, is that water tends to attack the weld around the outside of it, and that thinner metal around the outside of it tends to rust out quite easily. And obviously this can be compounded if you've got water coming through from the lack of the drainage channel. That will obviously attack the jacking point, and obviously it'll also attack the end plate of the sill. Now, to make matters worse, what you often see on these cars is the drainage holes in the bottom of the sill being blocked up, because even if you've lost the channel as long as water still flows between the two holes, most of it probably will still find its way out. But sometimes you see cars that have just had a plate put over the outside that may even have covered up the jacking point. And of course, if water's still getting into the sill, it's just going to sit there and it's just going to attack it from the inside. So probably some of the worst cases of rust on these that I've seen is where the drainage holes have been blocked up completely. So make sure that this hole is present. There should also be another hole, if I remember rightly, on the underside of the jacking tube here as well. That appears to have been deleted, blocked, whatever, on this car. And some repair panels seem to actually have more, additional holes over and above what they would have had from the factory. But either way, there should, as a minimum, be that larger rectangular hole beneath the door. And there should also be a smaller circular one that this car lacks on this side, underneath the jacking tube itself. Now, to look at that hole better on a car that has the outer wing on, you just want to open the door as wide as it'll go and just sort of look down the gap there. Now, I can't see, you can't really see on the video. Actually, there you go. Yeah, just about. If you look at it at the right angle, he says, there we go, you should actually be able to see daylight. And if you've got quite a powerful inspection light, or possibly even like a flexible camera or something, you can normally, again, tell whether there is a drainage channel there or not. The other thing that's worth saying about the sills, and this goes for the floor pans as well at the front, is that as far as I can tell, they are also vulnerable to water that is coming through the bulkhead. So water that's falling through the bottom of the outer plenum chambers, because you've got a hole like this, will obviously primarily initially attack the floor pans, but that water will also tend to find its way to the corner of the floor pans, the outer corner, and I think that will eventually start attacking the sill end plate as well, because you can see here, for example, there's a patch that's been put here, and this is, you almost always see these sorts of patches on cars. This is actually quite neat, but the problem is that it hasn't really gone far enough, and you've got another hole has opened up here. But I suspect part of the problem is that kind of rust that's migrating from the footwell across. So pretty much all of these that have lived in a Northern European or similar climate will have had repairs either to the sills, end of the sills, floor pans, whatever. Even if you're paying a lot of money for a car, it's not an issue, provided that the repairs be done correctly. It's very common to see a bit of a mess here, and certainly what I would be looking for are just like a large, neat repair that deals with the entire area, not just sort of small patches that have patched upon patched. The other thing to be careful of is the best way to repair these sills is probably to make a cut just about where the edge of the door is, or a bit further back. Take that whole outer sill section out and then replace it with a repair panel where the drainage channel has been correctly spot welded to the back of it. The jacking tube has had any repair done to it on the inner sill, the point on the inner sill where it's been welded, and then have it all welded up afterwards. The problem is that you see very often is that people just repair the area around the jacking point. So a common thing to see, for example, is to have a square cut around it and then just weld over the top. And the problem with that is that it's not addressed the drainage channel issue, and also you don't know about the integrity of the weld to the inner sill. Well, you might have looked at it when you had this out, but it's better probably to take the whole panel out here. The SL shop, for example, do a repair panel, and that's probably how I'm going to address this car as and when the time comes. But if you just do what a lot of people do, which is just a patch and patch on the outside, it's not solving the fundamental drainage issue, and that rust will just keep coming back.